And I'm Asaf Katz, and today joining me, Loenard Rorman. He's an AI ethics powerhouse. He's got a master's in science, multiple certifications like PMP and CSM. He's got an extensive experience in the educational technology. I'm going to talk about that, the LMS administration, AI prototyping. But he's also an innovation lab mentor at 1871, working with a lot of emerging startups. And he is a member of the OpenAI Forum, collaborating on AI development safety and AGI. Leo's post on LinkedIn, your post on LinkedIn, when you talked about AI and the copyright law and how that all works, to really sort of started this conversation. I would love to learn more about what got you into becoming so vocal about where AI is taking us, and let's dive from there.
Yeah, thanks so much, Asaf. I really appreciate you having me on the show, and thanks for the introduction. I really think that AI is going to be the future, not just in technology, but in pretty much every field, right? Every profession, including teaching, like you mentioned, but even things diverse like photography, farming, sculpture. Everything is ultimately going to be involving AI. So I think it's really important for us to stay on top of, where it's coming from, where it's going. I think ethics, like you mentioned, are a really important consideration. Like, is AI trained ethically? Are the people who produce the data that's being used to train AI being compensated fairly? I think the most important is what's it going to do to the world economy as it potentially displaces a lot of professions, and not necessarily replacing people, but displacing them. So those people have to then learn a new place to use their skills in this developing world economy. Is just so important. Um, you know, like you mentioned about ethics and training, I think it's really important for us to think about where that data comes from that's used to train AI. Like OpenAI is constantly being sued by all these different authors and artists. Midjourney recently got sued as well regarding image generation and video generation. There's
Do you
all
think
this
there's any
wealth.
teeth in these lawsuits? I mean, beyond what's right and wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's right and wrong is one question, and where the lawsuit will go is another question. I would say that, in general, in the United States, I don't think these lawsuits are going anywhere just because, creating all of these roadblocks to progress is too disruptive, especially right now where we have an administration that's very pro business and anti regulation. I think in the EU, there may be more teeth where the EU is more willing to restrict things. But I think that restriction is ultimately counterproductive. It's not stopping people from doing things; it's just displacing them once again, right? Like people are just going to go to a different country and run their AIs from there in a place that has less regulation. I think that it's very important for the U.S. to be pro-business, anti-regulation with regard to AI, just because, in particular, I think China is a really big competitor, and China is really going to have a very much hands-off approach to AI, in my opinion. I think that they're going to have restrictions about like what you can say about the government, but other than that, they're going to, not really enforce copyright because that's historically what they've done with technology.
Hmm.
So I think that any country or group of countries like the EU that enforces strongly a lot of regulation and copyright with regard to AI, they're not going to stop AI. They're just going to cause AI to move to other countries, and they're going to hurt themselves in the long term. I think it's really important on the one hand to talk about the ethics and like how do we fairly compensate people, but on the other, I think it's important for every country to act in their best interests in the long term. And in the long term, their best interest is inviting innovation and not fighting innovation.
Got it. I mean, the I wanted to ask you. So you wrote about copyright, and you gave some general guidelines around what you could do, and you could sort of explicitly say that you may not reuse my material, etc. Um, when I read that, because I play a lot with Base 44 and Replit and Cursor and all the tools that help, I immediately thought, well, hang on. So basically, my code is also AI generated. So would that mean that any software that I wrote with AI, someone could just now copy it and then what does this mean? When you have, I think it was Microsoft said in their last earning call that now a quarter of the code in production is AI generated. So if that's true, like, can I, are we entering a world where you can just copy Excel and now it's yours and they can't do anything? I don't think that's going to happen. But that's where I was thinking. Say more about your process of learning this, and what were you thinking as a creator as well?
Mhm. Yeah, so the first question is about copyrightability of code, and in general, technology is not really copyrightable, right? You can get a patent on a physical device, but you can't really get a patent or copyright on code, which is why we constantly see someone creates a product and then someone just makes a clone of it that's like the exact same thing, which the originator does not like. But at least in the U.S., from a copyright perspective, there's not a whole lot that can be done. So, I think AI will just kind of accelerate that to some extent where, you can use something like Cursor that has a screen reader, or Claude also has a screen reader, which means that, it can see your screen. You could just run an app and say, click all the menus and then make the same app, right? And the AI can do that. So what's there to stop someone from doing that? Nothing really. I'd say, the same forces that existed before to stop clones, which is just that if you have market penetration and a lot of users, that's, the strongest thing in your favor, right? That, someone could copyright Microsoft Excel, but Microsoft already has 1 million people using Excel. Um, and so that's kind of their biggest defense against copycats. Same thing for other
Research.
things that are being copied. Yeah, I think we could also do better than Excel. It's very slow. But the same thing, like there's Canva, for example, which has been very successful, and then everyone else is out there making Canva clones. But all those clones are slightly inferior. But there's really nothing stopping someone from copying Canva, adding a couple of game-changing features, and attaining market dominance. So really, it's a meritocracy, I think, in software that if you create a product and don't continue to maintain it and upgrade it and stay on top, it's open to anyone to just jump in there, clone your product, make theirs a teeny bit better, and steal all your users.
So, to take it a little bit to our world, say, okay, so now I'm uh, really any business, and any business is producing content, be it product content, code, marketing content, sometimes just publications. Uh, what can compliance teams really do uh, to help at least slow this down?
Yeah, so hypothetically, if you're having human contribution to at least 51% of something, it can be copyrightable. It
Hmm.
applies less to software, it applies more to like art or writing. But anything that's created by AI, at least right now, is not copyrightable. So, if you use Midjourney and you make an image, or you use Google VO and you make a video, unless you do a bunch of work on top of that, it's not really copyrightable. So, people will do things like stick their name in the bottom corner of an image, which does not make it copyrightable. Someone could just, erase your name and steal it. Um, if you make a video, again, unless you do like a bunch of editing and compositing, you're not really putting your stamp on it. That's always been the idea with copyright is you have to do at least 51% of the work for it to be copyrightable. So, within the software world, like I mentioned, there's really nothing stopping people from cloning your work. The best thing you can do is just stay on top, keep making new features, and make sure your version is the best. Which may involve, kind of reverse theft. That like if someone clones your product and adds some new features, you then go in and you copy their features and add new features on top of that. which ultimately I think is good for progress because it creates this kind of arms race for upgrades and making software better, where a company can't do what they used to do back in the day, right? Like Microsoft in 1995 or whatever made Microsoft Word, and then they didn't change anything for like 5 years. Which that model is no longer sustainable just because it's so easy to clone software using AI nowadays, where, like I said, you can just unleash an AI on software, say, go click everything, see what all functions do, and then copy it.
It's
So you
interesting
really have
because
to stay on top.
the I don't know, maybe you do. If there's a professional term for that cloning risk, IP theft, I think it's probably. But
Mhm.
IP theft is, if it's not really defined as IP, then there's no theft.
I mean,
But
it's still
cloning and
stealing,
copying
but
is
as
a
far as
risk.
the government is concerned, it's not theft, right?
Yeah.
Like I would call it stealing, but if you can't sue someone for it, what does it matter?
Exactly. So I think so what do you think teams and companies should be doing when basically it's legal to take away from them what their hard work has produced? Uh, what can they do other than working faster, releasing more features, and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that companies can do is they can put in the EULA end user licensing agreement. If you work from the following companies, you're not allowed to use their software and list all their competitors. So that way it does give you potentially a way to sue people. And again, I'm not a lawyer, right? But that would be my thought. Same thing, you can put in the end user licensing agreement that you're not allowed to reverse engineer. So, that licensing agreement then gives you something on top of the weaker existing laws where people have hypothetically agreed going into using your product that they don't work for a competitor and they're not going to try to reverse engineer. But other than that, I think, like I said earlier, the main thing to do is to just stay on top of things and keep releasing features. And that does create a lot of pressure for development teams where I think, you got to be constantly innovating. But, that's the world we live in nowadays where everything is moving a million miles a minute. And there's really no opportunity to like rest and take a breath, right? You have to constantly have your dev team working on coming up with new features, new things to make sure that you stay competitive.
Yeah, which obviously challenges the ethics of what we're doing a little bit. Uh,
Yeah, it challenges the ethics of human resource management as well, where you can't ever give your team a break. That it's like constantly crunch time, which is tough for engineers.
Say more about that because I saw you also vocal about that. So where do you see this trend is going? When we obviously do more with less is now the mantra for everyone. Uh, where do you think we're heading?
Yeah, I think that AI is really a productivity multiplier. And I see it as not significantly different from the internet or Wi Fi or computers or cell phones, just in terms of it gives people additional tools to work with. Um, when computers came out, they didn't like fire everyone, they just expect everyone to do more with less time. So I think we're going to see the same thing with software development in the software world, or really with any career, right? You're going to be expected to do more with less. I'm hopeful that it'll lead to shortened work weeks. Like a lot of people have talked about 30 or 35-hour work weeks, where hopefully it can lead to paying people the same amount of money to work fewer hours, with the assumption that they're going to be more productive during those hours. I think we'll head that way, but it also has the opportunity for business owners to just fire a ton of people and then keep people working the same hours, but have fewer humans working for their companies. That then brings up the issue of like, what do you do with all these people? We're going to have all these unemployed people. So either you have to pay people the same amount of money to work fewer hours, or we're going to end up with a ton of unemployed people, and we'll have to have some kind of universal benefit to keep those people employed, so they can feed their families.
And do you see that happening in a capitalistic environment?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I'm certainly hopeful that people will be generous, but we've definitely seen a lot of wealth consolidation in the past 20 years where the wealthiest are becoming wealthier and the poorest are becoming poorer. Um, so really, I'm just trying to, remain hopeful.
Hmm.
From a personal perspective, I'm trying to stay on top of AI so that I'll continue to be employable in 20 years if AI is able to replace everything. All we'll have left will be AI managers. So it's important to make sure that you're thinking like, how will I remain useful in this AI future? Um, but ultimately, I'm trying to remain hopeful. I think that governments will hopefully advocate for their citizens by trying to create some regulations that say things like you have to have a reduced work week, which will therefore create more room for jobs. But really, we'll have to see. I think that it'll be different in different countries. I think some countries will probably see a lot of people lose their jobs and a lot of suffering. I'm hopeful that the U.S., where I live, is not going to be one of those places. But I definitely do see, foresee that in a lot of developing countries, particularly in Asia and Africa, I'm very concerned that things could go poorly for people. That there might be a lot of job loss, and that would be really unfortunate for the people losing those jobs.
Yeah, definitely. I think another aspect is going to be very unfortunate. I think I'm curious what are your thoughts around this? Uh, there's there's a lot more impact with AI for the lack of regulation on other countries. And what I mean by that is that you have, for example, GDPR, for example. If you're going to be doing anything online in Europe, you have to abide by the GDPR. That's great. That's Europe protecting their own citizens. Uh, but with AI, if I'm using now this, DeepSeek or whatever other tool that's going, like, like immediately all of your data goes into this black box. It's completely unregulated and unsupervised, and it's much easier. They don't. I don't assume that DeepSeek complies with the GDPR or or really anything. Why would they?
Well, it definitely complies with Chinese government oversight, even if it's not running in China. Like if you ask it to tell you about the PRC, People's Republic of China, it says like all these really nice things about it. And it has like a lot of opinions that coincide with the Chinese government's party line. So I think we're seeing that. But yeah, there's always the possibility that if you have a bunch of regulation like GDPR, companies can just offshore, right? Run their models in a different country and then say like, screw you, Europe, I don't care.
Yeah.
Um, I think that.
Or they could say, well, as far as we're concerned, we've done, we're holding the data in the server. It's actually being processed some locally on our own, self-hosted LLM, and but we don't really know how it works. We don't really know what biases it might have,
Mhm.
um, and stuff like that. What are your thoughts around deep fakes that we're seeing, the good and the bad?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a ton of good. It's definitely good if you're like a marketing executive and you want to have
There's now
Scarlett
this
Johansson in your
selfie
advertisement.
gorilla trend that's going on. That's pretty good.
Mhm. But like really it just takes protections away from individual contributors, away from artists, away from actors. Um, Honestly, I don't think there's anything that can really be done to stop it. So similar to how I feel about image generators using artists' work to train, or video generators using YouTube videos to train, I don't think my opinion really matters just because it's kind of an unstoppable force in the same way that AI is an unstoppable force, right? You can't stop AI, regardless of if you think it's ethical or unethical. AI is happening, get on board or get out of the way, kind of, right? So, people are saying, like, oh no, Midjourney is going to take artists' jobs. It's like, well, if you're an artist, like, you can protest all day if you want, but I don't think that's going to do anything. You'd be better off finding some way to exist within the system and find a new livelihood for yourself that utilizes the features of AI. which some artists are starting to do, right? They'll start with AI as a starting point for sketches and brainstorming, or video. People are using it for like dream boarding to come up with prototypes, and then they make the final from that, which accelerates the process. I think those are the people who are going to be successful. I think the people who are out there holding up signs protesting AI, they're just kind of shouting into the wind, right? They're like yelling at a tsunami, and
I
more
mean,
power to
you
them. But
had you worked with LMS before and learning management systems and
Mhm.
education. I mean, when I saw, and I was running an education business about 10 years ago, when I saw the deep fakes, I thought that could be a very good application for teaching, especially when, if you can actually create some sort of a character that can express empathy, you can make it easier for people to learn. You can educate. I mean, I've done all the corporate, you know, uh, the plans that you have to go through, like sexual harassment. Like I've gone through there, it's always the same process you have to take, and then everyone tells each other the answers. Like you can actually make this a good plan, right? You can actually educate people well if the deep fake capability is amplifying that.
Yeah, I think that that's really one good use case among many. The idea being to have basically an individualized education for each user, where the AI could be responsive to people's needs. I think we'll still need teachers, but I foresee teachers being something more um, like coaches, where teachers would go around and monitor individual users' progress with the AI, which we already have in a lot of learning management systems that are used in primary education, where the teacher receives feedback on how people are doing, and that allows the teachers to concentrate their resources on the people who really need that extra help and who aren't succeeding with the AI. Whereas some users, might be learning everything they need to learn from the AI, and they don't need the teacher's help, right? A lot of people are very self-directed learners, and they actually learn better. I would say I'm probably one of them, when just left to their own devices, where they just say, "Here's Wikipedia, here's a couple textbooks, have at it." And those people will teach themselves. Versus there's other people who might need more guidance, more help from a human, and that kind of frees teachers up to do that. So I'm hopeful that class sizes will remain relatively consistent. That like we won't see teachers teaching 1,000 students in a classroom. We'll still see them teaching 30 students, and they'll just have their time and resources freed up to help those who need that extra help. I think that also just it'll give opportunities to make learning more fun, right? Like math could be presented in a lot of different contexts. So if
Hmm.
someone's interested in music, right, it could present it to them as a musician and talk about how math is important for music. If someone's interested in cars, it could talk about how math is important for automotive engineering, and find a way to really reach a learner in the same way a teacher would.
It's funny. Like my thought process every time I hear like the vision you just described seems amazing, and I'm thinking like, oh my God, like I would love my kids to being in a school that treats people like this. But then I'm thinking about like all the technical implications of such a thing. That means that every word that my kids will ever say will be recorded somewhere, right? So
Probably.
I don't want to know what I said when I was 7, or 13, or when I was really mad at the teacher. Like all of that's going to be recorded.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of just the brave new world that we're going into. You or I come from an era, we're probably about the same age, I'm 40, where, things were not being recorded. And when you went to a party, no one had a cell phone with the capacity to record everything that happened. Whereas now you go to a party or a sporting event or any other social thing, and there's like 8 people with their cell phones out, and probably everything is being recorded. I think that kids are just a lot more comfortable with that these days. People have accepted that that's kind of how the world works. I think that there's more education to be done about the implications of that, right? That like kids don't necessarily understand the bad parts of everything being recorded and how that could impact them in the future. But
I
I
think
also
it
think
would
that,
do even.
well,
I
I think that
disagree.
we'll see more acceptance from society in the future where, like if you said something dumb when you were 16, right? Nowadays, that could come back to haunt you. But I think that in 20 years, people will just, there'll be so much volume of, the amount of dumb things people have said on their records that, a certain percentage of dumb things, especially things that were said 20 years ago, will be acceptable, right? Like I think we saw with Brett Kavanaugh, right, the Supreme Court justice in the U.S. Stuff that he
Hmm.
did back when he was 16 really came back to bite him in the butt, right? That was very bad for him.
Yeah,
Whereas in the
comedians
future,
are being canceled for something they posted, you know, a decade ago. Uh,
right. So I think just, there'll be so much recording of everything that, it'll be more of a percentages thing. Like if only 1% of the things you said were offensive, you're in the clear. If 20% of the things you say are offensive, then you might be in trouble. But I think that, a certain amount of, I don't know, I almost call it like chaff, right? That like little bits and pieces of things you said that you shouldn't have said. As long as that percentage is low, it'll be acceptable just because everything is going to be recorded, like you said. That's just kind of the future we're going into where you're recorded at all times. There'll probably be cameras everywhere, like in London, all over the world, recording everything you do in public. Nothing you do will really be private. I think that's kind of a way we're going. Everything you do, like in school, like you said, will be recorded. And that's just kind of, again, the future. I don't think that there's a way around that. I think people just have to adapt to it.
so maybe to wrap up, I would love to bring these to the GRC teams that we see. So GRC, is a world of policies and processes, and a lot of the things that are, it can definitely be automated and sometimes eliminated with AI. Uh, the analogy from artists who have to now find how to, or they're being displaced, they have to find a new place for them to be. When you look at uh, an AI team or team member, what do you think are the steps they need to take in order to find the new place that they might
Yeah,
have?
I think that the biggest is just becoming really familiar with AI. So I really encourage everyone to go and buy a pro plan for Claude or ChatGPT. Personally, my daily driver is ChatGPT, but I also have subscriptions to Claude and Perplexity, which are two other engines I like. Um, you know, for me, it's more just to stay on top of things, but I think for a normal user, one is enough. And just spend 20 to 30 minutes a day minimum interacting with it and using it for different things. There's a lot of different use cases. So for example, I use ChatGPT and Claude at work, right? When I have a work problem, I input it. When I produce output at work, I run it through these tools. I do a lot of automation coding, and I'm starting to use Cursor for that as well, where I say, like, look at my code and give me suggestions to improve, to learn, to be better. In the future, I think I'll trust the tools more and I'll say, just do it for me. But right now, I tend to do it myself and have it check my work versus it doing it and I check its work.
Hmm.
So I think we'll see an inversion of roles there. Um, I think that will continue to be a big thing. HF, real life human feedback, where people will have an AI do something and then say, like, is this output good or bad? Both in terms of training the AI, but also in terms of creating a role for themselves. Like, what are the people going to do? Is check the AI's work. I think that humans, for now at least, are a lot more creative than AIs. So in things that involve creativity, having a human in the director's seat can be helpful. So like VO for video or Midjourney for images can do a lot of cool stuff, but it's really up to the human being that's prompting them, that's writing the inputs to come up with the creative stuff. So, figuring out a way to fit those into your tool set, just the same as people figured out a way to use Photoshop for photography or Adobe Premiere Pro for video, right? You figure out ways to let the computer do what it's best at and you do what you're best at as a human. But in particular, I think that unlike with some of these other technologies where like there was a fixed inflection point, where it was created, you started using it, and it is what it is. AI is continuing to evolve, so that's why I recommend that kind of daily practice because what you find as a good use case for AI and a good place to slot yourself in today may change by tomorrow. So you have to continually sort of stay on top of that and think to yourself, like, how can I best use this technology to make sure my output as a human plus AI team is optimal, right? You're always trying to optimize that human plus AI output. And I don't know that we'll ever get to a point where an AI alone will beat human plus AI, just because of the synergies and the ways that AI thinks so differently from humans. So, really, it's just a matter of thinking not in terms of like, what do I do, but how do I maximize output? How do I make sure that the output from this, human plus robot team is the best it can be? And then how do I continue to adapt tomorrow to stay on?
So no other choice. We got to dive in and learn the tools and adopt them to find our place. But I guess we don't know where the wave is taking us, but we want to be on top. Uh,
Yeah, I think like if you look, no one would hire someone who said, I don't use telephones or the internet, right? You'd be like, that's ridiculous, get out of here.
yeah,
So the same thing will apply to AI. If someone says like, I don't use AI, I don't believe in it, no one's going to hire that person, right? Because that's just the future. And that person is stuck in the past. So, I think it's up to individuals, individual contributors to continually refine and adapt and say like, how can I be the best I can be? Being really good at using AI is just the same as like being really fast working with Excel, right? An accountant who's really fast and capable with Excel and knows all the functions is more useful than an accountant who doesn't. So similarly, a worker who's really good with AI is going to be much more valuable to a company than a worker who doesn't really know how to use it. Like they use it, but they're being forced to, and they don't really understand it and they don't like it. So some of it's going to be acceptance, some of it's going to be training, but ultimately, I think it's just a tool or a skill, just like anything else, and it's up to people to stay on top of it and try to maximize their utilization and their abilities with this tool moving into the future.
Leo, thank you so much. We're out of time, but this has been fascinating. I've been really enjoying reading your stuff because
Thank you.
you
I
bring
appreciate that.
always a perspective I didn't think of, or oh, right, there's creativity for kids. So how do okay now I have to worry about that for a few minutes. So thank you so much. How could people contact you?
Yeah, so you can visit my website, Rodman.ai. You can also look me up on LinkedIn, and I'm also on, the other platforms, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. So, check me out, look at my posts, shoot me a message. I'm always happy to talk to people like yourself or really anyone else who's interested in AI.